So, hey everybody, as you can tell from the title, we're going to be reviewing a special book. You could say it is a booktube darling, if you will. This series was sort of launched into its fame from influencers on the YouTube spheres. Not YouTube spheres. There's only one YouTube sphere, and it sort of just elevated and once it got the eyes on it that it deserved, it became a super well known sci-fi space opera series, and that is the Sun Eater series. Of course, as a poverty-stricken YouTube channel, views are short supply here. I had to jump on the hype train, guys, and I'm happy I did. But the Sun Eater series starts with book one, Empire of Silence, and that's the book we're gonna be talking about today. So, yeah. So the breakdown for this video, we're going to talk about pros first. We're going to talk about cons next, and then near the end of the video, we'll wrap up going over some theories I have on where I think that the series will go, or where our main character's journey will lead him in the next book in the series. So yeah, let's start with the good. Honestly, I think there's a lot of good to be found in this book. I know a lot of people said this is their least favorite book in the series, and well, if that's the case, I'm going to really enjoy this series because I ended up enjoying myself with Empire of Silence. We could touch on world building first. That's maybe the biggest, most foremost pro. Um, let's talk about the derivativeness from Dune. Yes, there is similarities between Empire of Silence and Dune. That's evident enough. But despite what some say, I don't think it's a ripoff of Dune. The similarities are there, but I'd say this is more of a homage to the genre and the appreciation of Frank Herbert's work more than let me just steal his story and put my own flavor on it. Like the Empire of Silence may start in a similar vein to Dune, but it takes a very much a different direction. Especially once we get off of that first planet of Delos or Medwa, forget. Once Hadrian leaves home, this book really loses all the complaints that you could make about the similarities to Dune. But I think those comparisons to Dune just go to show how really rich the world building is here. It's super cool because we get the Empire. We sort of get a feeling for how far the Empire's hand reaches, right? The Empire, the Solon Empire, is very much authoritarian, sort of Nazi-like in their regime. They perform eugenic surgeries on the imperial royal class so that they all look like perfect with like no acne or you know no deficiencies. So for example, spoiler. Maybe I should put a spoiler for this whole video, but Hadrian, our main character, is one of these nobles who he was born from a vat of collected cells to make a very handsome, perfect, sculpturesque child. He wasn't like born from a woman's body. Um, but we sort of really get to see how that influences the function of society in the planets in the systems under the Solon Emperor. For example, we could see the Chantry, which the Chantry is almost like the sword of the Empire in a sense when it comes to controlling the masses and making sure that they follow his ideals. Because the Chantry is set up to be a religious society, a religious faction, but it's really just a faction because the Chantry is basically a tool for the emperor to keep his people in the dark about certain epiphanies about the universe, so his people stay worshiping Mother Earth and they don't see the truth of humanity. The Chantry really does elevate the human. Humans are the most pristine, premier beings in the universe. Again, the parallel to Nazism, right? The Nazi ideals of blonde hair, blue eyes being or the Ubermensch, which is Nietzsche. Which that's not fair. I don't think Nietzsche was trying to start Nazism with his Ubermensch debates that he made. But yeah, the comparisons there. And we really get to see through the characters that are part of the Chantry, how imposing this force is in the Empire. For example, Gilliam Voss is one character that Hadrian interacts and has a deep their stories intertwined very closely, um, and we get to see how much influence the Chantry really does have over uh, its subjects. What's really cool is that the world building doesn't stop there. So we have other planets outside of the Solid Empire, right? And these we sort of get to see societies more similar to what you'll see in the traditional sci-fi canon, right? Uh, we have the Tavrosi, who are people who combine themselves with technology. So there's that cyberpunk angle of the genre, and they instead of the abandoning instead of abandoning or making or outlawing atomics, similar to the situation we have today, not outright, but very similar. The Tavrosi, each dominion has a supply of atomics that could eradicate any other dominion that would try to start a war with them, which Hadrian finds archaic, which is kind of ironic, right? Because his peoples are more of like foots on the ground. That's how we do our warfare. Um, and we also get to see through a sort of envoy scientist, Volka, who will become an important character. I should probably talk about characters after this section, but we also get to see the culture of the Tavrosi through her. How they see, she calls Hadrian a barbarian because his peoples take place in the Colosseum, and she thinks that's brutal and barbarous that these people, hack and cause violence to each other for entertainment. Which that's probably pretty agreeable there. It's a good point. But yeah, just in general, the world building really is great here. It feels like this is a universe that's been lived in. There is history here. There is unique societies that have formed through the domination of the stars of humanity, and that was one big draw for me, especially in a series like a longer series. The fact that you have this great world to work in only is going to keep readers wanting to read more, right? So good job for Christopher Ruocchio there. I'll also discuss character because I think there's a lot of pros with the character work as well, um, which could be debated for the series, right? Because a first person narrative story, you don't get as much in depth exploration of these other characters because you're not in their head, right? We're stuck in Hadrian's head. But I think the character work, you despite that fact, you really do sort of get a feel for how these characters act and what their motives are, despite not being in their heads, right? For example, the love interest Volka in book one, we really sort of come to understand how the Tavrosi and their distant planet worlds function through how she sees society, right? She thinks the Imperial, that's her favorite curse word, is the Imperial, because Imperials are evil, which, yeah, she has a good point. They are. Um, and so she has a lot of interesting dialogue with Hadrian, who was born Imperial, but he's like sort of not like the other Imperials, right? He's like not like the other girls. He doesn't believe in how they run things. But we get some great conversations between those two that reveal Volka's character, and her. We also get to insight into a certain power that she has with her bonding of robotics into her body, which comes in very important near the end of the book. But and especially one scene in the book I'd like to point out to sort of exemplify this piece of evidence that I'm putting forth is the discussion that Hadrian and Volka have before Hadrian goes and duels William Goss or Gilliam Voss, yeah. Before they do their formal duel, we have this very interesting debate on when is it the time to fight and how, right? And the character work with Hadrian is also highlighted very well here because although we get the sense that he very much despises the Chantry, of course, which you should. He very much does not agree with his father's, imperialistic, very tight grip that he has with his people, his authoritarian style of rule. Hadrian's more of a diplomat, and that becomes apparent too in his conversations and delegations with the Cielson later in this book. But we get this sort of debate of when is it the time to fight and how should you do it, right? And we get to see that, Hadrian, despite being somebody we can root for, he still has his flaws, right? He feels this sort of chivalrous motive to punch Gilliam in the face because he disrespected Volca. When in that scenario, I would say he overstepped, right? I think Volca is, a lady who's very much capable of fending for herself, right? And his overstep there ends up putting him in a very terrible situation. And so we get to see, like, while Hadrian, he still has some of those like imperial values maybe in him that he's still trying to get over, or thoroughly consider within himself. Where does he want to go with his political ideology in the future? But yeah, and they have that conversation. Vulca's sort of like, now was the time. You shouldn't have done it. And Hadrian's like, well, with a guy like Gilliam, if you just keep letting him step on you, then he'll just keep doing it and keep getting what he wants until sometime at some point someone has to step in and stop him. Which is really a very good debate there, because while Volka argues that maybe through conversation, maybe there's other means to do it. Hadrian makes the argument that if I were to step in here and put him in his place, then I'm in return saving a lot of people from facing his travesties that he might commit. Um, which Hadrian does come later to regret taking the life of spoiler. All right, spoiler warning, but he does take the life of Gillian Voss in this duel. Uh, and so yeah, and it's not just with Volca. With Hadrian's discussions with his father, like I mentioned earlier, I forget his name, but and just go ahead and throw Crispin, Hadrian's brother, in there too. We really get to understand the difference in all these characters through how they interact with each other, how they think of each other. So yeah, through Hadrian's interactions with his father, we really do get to see that Hadrian's more of a diplomat than his father, who may be more like imperialistic, more authoritarian. And through his relationship with his brother Crispin, we get to see a lot about what Hadrian thinks of the ideal, maybe imperial heir. Sort of wrap up the prose section. Yeah, I mean Christopher Ruocchio. I didn't mention this earlier, but he does have a way with words. I feel like I have to have a companion dictionary when I'm reading this book because he uses so many words that aren't common in our lexicons, and it's just like it's the perfect word to describe what he's trying to get across. And also the way he constructs his words, how they flow, it just feels very natural. It's not choppy, and Hadrian can really do a soliloquy in very much in a Hamlet esque fashion. So yeah, I mean, the writing was just another thing that drew me. Christopher Ruocchio, you can tell. I've watched interviews he's had with other YouTubers where he does, you know, he does the extensive outlining. So when he's actually writing, he can focus on the connection of the words, the actual placement of the words, instead of like worrying about the overall story because he already has that part mapped out. But yeah, great. So on the pro side, great for Christopher Ruocchio. There's another point I'm going to make. Let me check my notes. But yeah, so Rocky has a way of talking about the human condition, right? How we interact, why we act in the way we do, behave in the ways that we do, which was very beautiful in some select sections to hear Hadrian sort of pontificate on the human condition. But yeah, and then my last point was the ending. So yeah, definitely spoiler alert here, but the ending was very much sort of reminded me of Morning Star from Red Rising, but not as cheesy as the Morning Star ending. Like we get a hopeful ending here, which I did enjoy. In reality, there's a lot of sad realities that we face every day. You look on the news and they kind of just talk about negative jazz that's happening. So to get a story like this, where it very much could have took a more tragedy-esque tone, it makes it into a hopeful ending with the characters that we met along the way, sort of joining Hadrian on his journeys farther out into the empire to sort of find, basically doing a mission for the emperor, because he wants to, as a person who can speak Cielson, sort of make peace, talk peace with the Cielson, which is something that's never happened before. But yeah, so a lot of pros here. There's some cons though. Let's talk about what I didn't like so much. All right, so first there's a lot of spitting. So yeah, like a lot of the characters spit to emphasize how they feel about a situation, and like like a lot of them spit. I noticed there was a lot of spitting in like the probably about the first like 60-70% of this book. A lot of characters spitting. I just wonder maybe if there was a different physical mannerism or that Ruocchio could have used to describe disgust other than spitting, because there was a lot of spitting. There was a lot of the Marlowe grin too, especially in the first like 30-40% of this book. It's like everyone's flashing that Marlowe grin, and I'm like, what does that even mean? What is the Marlowe grin? Uh, but yeah, he uses that one a lot, which also I was kind of like, okay, like I get it. It serves a purpose, but maybe he might have overused it too much, in my opinion, to where it becomes repetitive. So now we're going to touch on some of the actual like story structure or the function of the plot, uh, and my cons or what I had questions about concerning that. So why would Hadrian not join the Colosseum earlier? This guy's living in poverty for years. He didn't think once like, well, I actually have training. I could just be a gladiator. Um, I don't know. Maybe of course I always miss these things in his books. Put down in the comments if I missed that. But I feel like Ruocchio didn't put in a justification for why he waited so long, or maybe he did, but it wasn't a strong enough one for me to remember. So that was one thing I was like, why didn't Hadrian just like join the Colosseum earlier? All right, so another one is when Hadrian sort of pulls out his House Marlowe ring. He reveals that he is a nobile. He's like, "Listen, Gilliam, I challenge you to a formal duel because you disrespected Volca and my honor with your actions." And the Count Mataro of the planet Imesh, where Hadrian goes from Delos to Tukros, that doesn't happen. He gets dropped off on Imesh, sort of like a backwater world, and eventually he works his way back into like working with the royal class. And the man of this royal class is Count Mataro. But Count Mataro is in the audience when this happens, and so he's like, "Okay, Hadrian, like you are a noble. I will give you the right to a duel." But we later find out after this duel that Count Mataro had known that Hadrian's father and grandmother had disowned him the moment he left Delos. So Count Mataro knew that Hadrian actually didn't have that status. So why would he still grant him the right to the duel if he knew that getting Gilliam killed wouldn't look good for him or Hadrian? Because killing a member of the Chantry and you're sort of an imperial sanctioned world, that's you don't want to do that. That makes you like puts you in a bad situation. Killing the highest ranking Chantry member on your planet, killing her son. That probably wasn't a good idea. And he knew, but he still gave him the right to the duel. So I wonder maybe if that's just more like, hey, I want to hold his honor to what he wants to do instead of looking out for my own personal situation. I don't know, but that part kind of confused me. So I wonder if there's a justification there for that. Uh, so put that in the comments if you know why. Like two more points on the actual like structure plot I'd like to point out. Uh, a lot of these chapters sort of had like for us to get into the next stage in Hadrian's character arc in the story. Oh, my cat's up here. Oh, watch out! Watch out! Look at your papa! Look at your papa! Yeah. So like I was saying, to sort of leapfrog us into the next section of the story that Hadrian needs to get to elevate his character further or progress his character further in the story. Um, it's like he was always getting knocked out or losing consciousness, right? Um, yeah, or like dialogue. We'll get a bit of dialogue and then the chapter will end, which I've seen that in a lot of books actually. That they'll end the chapter with like a piece of like crazy dialogue, and they do that like repeatedly through the book instead of switching it up. That wasn't very egregious here by Ruocchio, but move, move, move. Um, what was I talking about? Yeah, so it's like there's I think 3 or 4 occasions on this book where Hadrian loses consciousness, and that's how we get to the next part of the story, right? So when he gets beaten up on Medwa on Delos, we jump to the next section of the book. Uh, when he goes to the cryo chamber and he loses consciousness, and then he goes to Imesh, and then when he goes to see the CLs and he loses consciousness, and then he sprouts to the Count. It's like anytime we're going to the next like big part of the story that's going to take Hadrian on a completely different arc, he has to lose consciousness to do so. Which I don't know. Maybe that's just a minor complaint. That is something that I was like, oh, okay, maybe there was a different way to transition from scene to scene than relying on the losing consciousness sort of trope. The other thing, it's another trope that bugged me a little bit, and that's at the end of the story when Hadrian gets a very key important information. I mean, this is like super important piece of information. This like jumps us into the next book and is the main topic of the next book type of information, and he gets it through a fight scene to the death. I was like, oh man, that's very much like, you've seen the movies where the maybe the hero and the bad guy are fighting, and then in the middle of the fight, the bad guy takes the time to be like, "Listen, man, like I wasn't even bad though. I was actually a good guy. This is why I did all this." It's like, would you actually have time to relay this information if you're fighting to the death? I mean, Hadrian's sitting here stabbing the Cielson, uh, Avenari, I think was his name, or Navari, and while this guy's getting stabbed, he like is able to relay important information to him. I'm sort of like, would he even be able to do that? I don't know. I think if I was fighting somebody to the death, I don't know if I'd have uh, the ability or the breath to take the time to be like, oh, well, here you go. This is the support information. You need this. Like, I think I'd be more worried on like trying not to die or trying to escape. So that's a cliche that I've seen before, and it kind of got to me a little bit. Um, but yeah, and then there's one more thing I'd like to talk about when it concerns cons. It's not really a con. It's more of a discussion of literary theory. So let's jump into it. So before I started reading Empire of Silence, I did watch some reviews on the Sun Eater series, some complaints that people had. And one discussion, I forget the name of the YouTuber, but they sort of brought to light the connection that maybe Christopher Ruocchio is kind of unscrupulous, forget the word, uh, in his ideals, maybe as a person, because we see that the Cielson are set up as the main big bad, and they are referred to by like they them pronouns. And the other bad guy that's seen bad in this universe, which is the people or the robot machines that people in the outer galaxy still utilize, but the Imperials sort of out disbanded with artificial intelligence because of a war that happened. So like that's another connection to do there. Um, and they're also referred to as it, or like non-gendered pronouns. And a connection was made that maybe Ruocchio has a negative perception of this group of people because of how they're framed in the story. But I think it's important to note, especially with Hadrian, is that the Cielson are the big bad, but Ruocchio takes the time to discuss to us that maybe they're not actually the big bad. They're the Chantry's big bad, the religious faction's big bad, which that could you can make a real life connection there. But we see through Hadrian. Hadrian doesn't see them as that. He sees them as people that we've never tried to communicate with. They're just foreign. They're aliens. And Hadrian really comes to understand, well, I can't fully understand these people. They've went down a different evolutionary path, but I want to make peace. I don't see them as just inherently evil, right? Um, and so that's why I would sort of discredit this notion. Now, I don't know where Hadrian's ideals will lead him into later books. So I am ignorant there. I will admit that. But just off of Empire of Silence, I don't think that connection was intentional. I think Ruocchio is just using these sort of pronouns to just say that this is a different culture of people. They're different than humans. They are, just sort of help us understand that Hadrian is trying to bridge that gap because there is a gap there, and Hadrian's trying to bridge it. And while some people, the Chantry, because calling the Cielson evil fits their narrative and their ideals and their motivations to stay in power, Hadrian doesn't think so. And so, and you could say Volca probably doesn't think so. Volca tries to talk to the. She would probably enjoy the opportunity to talk to the Cielson. I'm trying to think. There's another point made there, but I again, I don't think that it is sort of a question of literary theory, right? Like, how much of the author do you put into the story? Like, is it the complete death of the author, or do we let the author and maybe their persona as a person sort of influence our reading of the story? And I think here, I would say this is more of, like I mentioned, this is Ruocchio just trying to set up a different society of peoples that Hadrian has to go and connect with. And the only reason they're sourced up as the big bad is because Hadrian comes from the part of the galaxy that considers them uh, like demons or whatever, because it supports their narrative that they're trying to push out to the masses to keep themselves in power. All right, so to wrap up the video, we're going to talk about some theories I have for where the story series is going to go from here. So, uh, I'm guilty. I have already started reading book two, Howling Dark. I'm about 4 chapters. I'm about 6 or 7 chapters into that book. And I have to pause because my fiance is calling me. All right, I'm back. One theory I have, maybe this won't happen in book two, but maybe later down the road. I think that Hadrian may be the head or the lead of a rebellion against the Empire, maybe? I don't know. I just see that his ideals right now are sort of skewed toward going in the opposite direction of the Empire, and maybe Hadrian can collect the extra Solarians and the Tavrosi, maybe the outer world systems, and start a rebellion against the Empire. While that would be very difficult to do because the Cielsen are also attacking, and they're majorly going for extra Solarian colonies, so that would be like a war on two fronts. Um, so maybe not such a good theory there. I also think this next book, we're definitely going to get more exploration of the Hadrian and Volca relationship, and that one was spoiled for me. Well, not spoiled. I read chapters like 5, and I sort of got an idea of where they stand at the moment after the time skip. But I do think some there's going to be more important developments of the relationship because I'm pretty sure Volca is the in-game partner for Hadrian. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get to that point. But yeah, that'll do it for today's video, everybody. Thank you all for watching. Um, Hopefully, I'll have an idea for a video next week. I should. We'll see. Right now, I'm reading Howling Dark and A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, so maybe a review of one of those. Look out for that. But thank you all for watching, and have a great Saturday or Sunday. Bye bye.